talking to, we were able to decode these scenes from the 50s. So that's what you're going to get, some vignettes, some scenes, mostly from down in Kingsbridge and up here in Spuyten Duyvil. And there was another set of films that you'll see at the end. Most of the Spuyten Duyvil films come from a set that I actually found on eBay. From that same time period, belonging to a couple that lived up here in Spuyten Duyvil. So let's start in. And I'm going to set the stage for these film clips. This is where our first scene will take place, right here at West 231st Street. Do people recognize this? I'm going to go ahead and admit this person here. Yes, we're going to let him in. So yeah, our first scene starts right here on West 231st Street. This is between Broadway and Albany Crescent, sort of catty corner to where the old Piper's Kilt used to be. And this film clip I'm going to show is from 1951. Okay, I think I get rid of that too, I guess. Here we go. So this clip's about 90 seconds. And it's a scene from December 1st, 1951. And you can see a long line of people there on 231st Street. It's so long that it wraps around Albany Crescent, this line. Bookstore.
So that's Albany Crescent, that little corner right there.
Man holding a package of some kind.
Okay. They're all coming out of that white.
Movie theater marquee there.
That Dale Diner was right. No audio.
There's no audio. No, these are silent. So,
there we go.
does anyone think they know what that clip was depicting? This reveals it. Yes. The opening of Northside Savings Bank, which was front page news on the Riverdale Press. I'm going to read from this November 22nd issue. More than 20,000 persons are expected to lend a gay holiday air to the formal opening of the new main offices of the Northside Savings Bank at Broadway and West 231st Street next Saturday, December 1st. Commemorative plates based on historical places in Kingsbridge and Riverdale and a variety of other items were given away that day. So I'm wondering if anyone has seen this commemorative plate before.
Wow.
This one?
Yeah, I have that one.
You have that one, great. So that's the Henry Hudson Monument. So that's the Henry Hudson Monument in the center of the plate. And along the rim are other historic scenes from the neighborhood. Okay, all right. Someone in the audience has the plate. So the Kingsbridge Historical Society helped pick the images for this plate and includes some well-known imagery like this is the Macomb Mansion, or the Godwin Macomb Mansion, which stood at the corner of West 230th Street and Broadway, where today there's a Dunkin' Donuts. But prior to that, it was a colonial tavern, and it goes way back. Or this other scene of the historic King's Bridge, which was the first bridge to Manhattan, first bridge to Manhattan from the mainland, built in 1693. One fun image from that film clip is this colorful marquee for the Dale Theater, which is now the Dale Diner, or Louis Dale Diner. And you obviously saw everyone walking in and out of the bank, which I think now is a UPS store. So what's showing at the Dale Diner? Esther Williams, Red Skelton, and Howard Keel in a Texas Carnival. And looking through the Riverdale Press of 1951, it became really clear to me that there was a lot to do in this neighborhood at that time. So the neighborhood had 2 movie theaters, not just one. There was a driving range, a bowling alley, a little amusement park for children, soda fountains, diners, and restaurants and bars like we have today, many active places of worship, many civic organizations and societies and clubs that organize dances and parties for people. And the kids of the neighborhood apparently enjoyed free range. They were playing in vacant lots and that sort of thing. So here's the other movie theater, which today is like, it looks like a movie theater. It's like the biggest Kentucky Fried Chicken you've ever seen. But it was once the RKO Marble Hill. And so this is from the 1951 Riverdale Press. They were showing Streetcar at the end of 1951. And every issue of the Riverdale Press had ads for both theaters. So it was really great to see the classics of cinema. So I just want to zero in real quick on this slide because there's some interesting things about this clip. Just going back a moment. It shows the number of buildings that do not exist anymore at that intersection of Albany Crescent and West 231st Street. And that has to do with the roads. So that intersection, Albany Crescent and West 231st Street, is a rather historic intersection. Are we aware of this? It's where the Albany Post Road, the historic colonial Albany Post Road, met the historic Boston Post Road. They came together right there across from where the Piper's Kilt used to be. They came together, went over to the Kingsbridge and crossed into Manhattan from there. So can you imagine Paul Revere riding on this road numerous times to alert the New York committees before the revolution? That happened. So in the 1950s, okay, we're kind of stopped in a weird spot here. Let's see. Let's see if I can get to the building I want to show you. Maybe here. In the 1950s, some of those buildings were torn down for the construction of the Major Deegan Expressway. So that's the sort of modern version of the Albany Post Road. And it was built for ease of transportation, commerce, but also for defense. And this is going to be a theme you hear tonight, because this is the beginning of the Cold War. And you'll find in the issues of the Riverdale Press in the early 50s, you know, announcements about who's getting shipped off to Korea, fallen soldiers being honored in the paper. And the neighborhood was, or I guess America as a whole, was sufficiently concerned about this. And Eisenhower was, he needed a system of interstates to move troops and tanks and everything around the country if the Soviets ever invaded. So this building was torn down. This was the former home of the Van Cortlandt Democratic Club, Tynan's Hardware, and Robert's Books. And there were multiple bookstores in the neighborhood. It wasn't just one. So it's pretty amazing compared to what we have today. So this one, Roberts and Tynan's, both moved down to Broadway after this building on the corner here was torn down. And this is obviously selling Christmas trees on the corner there. Now take a note of this interesting sign on the corner. Speaking of the Cold War, you see it says, buy bonds and join civil defense. And this is something you saw in every issue of the Riverdale Press, urging people to take part in civil defense. And so what is this all about? Well, civil defense needed now 900 lifesavers. It has often been pointed out that Riverdale will be on its own should an atomic bomb ever fall nearby. Whatever disaster relief residents get, they themselves must largely provide. It is the same in every community. And then this is a PTA meeting at PS 81. Civil defense can be effective only if the public is educated to minimize casualties. Zachariah Subarski, chairman of biology and general science at the High School of Science of New York, told the PTA of PS 81. people that I'm sure went there to talk about the bake sale. He illustrated his discussion of civil defense against the atomic bomb with slides showing the effects of an atomic explosion. The film, Pattern for Survival, emphasized steps to be taken in the event of atom bombing of the city. So I grew up in the 80s and we did have drills in school, hiding under the desk, going to the hallway, that sort of thing. But I don't know if it was a lot more real to the folks of early 1951 because the wars were happening in terms of the Korean War. Now, the next film clip I'm going to show takes place about here. So this is West 230th Street. You're getting off the D and you make a right, you head to Broadway. So that's Broadway there. There's the L. And so this is a bit of a long clip. It's 3 minutes long, so there might be a long moment of silence here. Broadway. And a massive tree towering over the L. So this is a two-person chainsaw. Massive tree. That's the view looking south down Broadway.
Wow. Oh, so that's the night or the Marble.
St. Stephen's Methodist Church, yes. They're still working on that tree. I've never seen a chainsaw like this. It's amazing. I think it's getting stuck here. So what would possess someone to take all this footage of the tree cutting? And the kids go wild. There's no way that would happen today. All these kids in a lot jumping around. There they are, all over the tree.
Yeah, this never, that's for sure.
That little brown house is still there. Okay, so why would people take footage of, why would someone take a film of this tree being chopped down? And well, big old trees are sometimes seen as witnesses to the passage of time. And these trees certainly would qualify for that. This is a photo of that corner, West 230th and Broadway. So the Dunkin' Donuts would be here today. But that's a little gas station. Maybe you could see that a little bit of that building there in that film clip. So you see those big old trees out back here in the background, and this right here are those trees. They were English elm trees. And back there closer to Broadway. And if you go back further, this is a photo from 1927. You can see them in earlier photos as well. So there's one of them on the right there in front of that Macomb Godwin mansion that you saw on the plate. And so 10 years before this photo was taken, you could have rode down 230th Street because that was the Spuyten Duyvil Creek. So these trees witnessed the total transformation of the neighborhood from, you know, almost like a rural setting to the urban environment. So that's why I think folks decided it was worth documenting the loss of these trees. Now, why were they being chopped down? We'll get to that in a moment. Some local members of the Kingsbridge Historical Society tried to save a little bit of it here. Including, you can see on the left, Theodore Kazimiroff, who was the first Bronx County historian. I wish they had said how many rings they counted on the tree. But... So I'm gonna just zero in on one part of that longer clip real quick here, because I heard folks muttering about this one. And what I heard someone say was that these are the NYCHA houses going up, the Marble Hill houses, and that's absolutely correct. So this is the Marble Hill houses under construction in the late 40s. And like many other housing projects, they were filled in creek beds and marshy areas, sort of like the last available land in New York City. But people that I've talked to that grew up in the neighborhood remember this site. I mean, it's very impressive. And, you know, after the baby boom, after the war, there were a lot of young families in need of homes, but they couldn't find them. And so we see in the Riverdale Press the move-in day at Marble Hill. Early in 1952, all of the Marble Hill houses, the city's 44th permanent housing project, will be occupied. The population will total 5,522 people. More than 95% of the tenants will be young veterans of World War II, their wives and children. So I find this interesting in a sense because every paper has some sort of allusion to the dangers of communism and the Cold War, and yet this is a massive government-funded housing project, and no one ever, you know, makes a connection there, which is kind of interesting. So this is a 1943 market analysis of the neighborhood. I'm just including it here because just to give you some idea of what it meant to have 5,500 more people moving into the neighborhood. If you have the total population is 22,000 of Riverdale, Kingsbridge, and Spuyten Duyvil put together. So this is like a 25% increase. And there's other interesting things about this, like 5,400 foreign-born white people. And I've been told that was largely Irish. I've been very few people other than white people in the neighborhood. So, like I said, there's all this, you know, information about the potential of getting bombed and the threat of communism. Is just remarkable that this happened, but it's sort of totally born out of necessity. These were veterans families that had nowhere to live. So this is our next clip. It's about 90 seconds in the same spot. Band playing, lots of flags. Dignitaries. That's James Lyons, who was the Bronx Borough president from the 30s into the 60s. James Lyons speaking. So does anyone think they know what's going on in this clip? Post office opening, yeah, opening and dedication. So this was 1951. Here's the Riverdale Press article about it in 1951. A little blurb here under the title "Height of Democracy." Harry Hirschfield, prominent humorist of Can You Top This fame, struck a significant keynote when he spoke at the dedication of the new post office as the height of democracy. By contrast, he said, Russia tries to prevent assemblage by mail, through which people may interchange ideas freely. The expansion of our postal facilities is an important asset in improving our line of communications between people everywhere. And so you see, you saw all the flags, you saw the band. Patriotism and religion played a much more prominent role, very evidently in the Riverdale Press, makes it very clear. I'd say most of the people in this photo are either, pastors or priests or rabbis. It was across the street. The old post office was located across the street. So this fellow intrigued me. Who is he? He's an old timer. A concert was presented by the post office band prior to the ceremonies. The post office quartet led the national anthem. Among those who attended was Patrick J. Coleman, 89, of 5771 Huxley Avenue, first postman in the Kingsbridge area. So Pat Coleman was born in 1862 in Kingsbridge, when the area was still part of Yonkers in Westchester County. And he delivered mail and a horse and buggy to Riverdalians. And he delivered the newspapers too, which were packed in bundles down in New York City, put on the New York Central, run up to Riverdale Station, and the train never stopped. They just threw the papers off the train, and he delivered them to homes. And he finally remembered catching clams and eating them right out of the Spuyten Duyvil Creek. And he remembers Riverdalians, almost all Riverdalians, owning a couple of cows. So it's not hard to figure, from my perspective, why folks of this period decided to form a local historical society. Because you have people like Pat Coleman around sharing those kinds of memories, and you have such grand projects changing the whole face of the neighborhood.
Does Huxley Avenue still exist?
The house still
I don't
exists.
know that street.
That house still exists on Huxley Avenue, yes. That's in North Riverdale. So this is our next image, is going to depict this modern scene here of West 230th Street and Kingsbridge Avenue. This is an aerial view of that shot. So you can see a little bit of the steeple of St. Stephen's Methodist Church on the bottom left there. And that's West 230th going across. So here's the clip. It's a short one, just 25 seconds. Pointing at some wooden beam there. And near a chopped down tree. That's where the Marble Hill Playground is today. So this clip was a bit of a mystery, and I didn't find anything in the Riverdale Press to really provide a lot of information, but the spot gives a clue, I think. So there's a chopped down tree there, a felled tree, and then in the background, he's pointing at a wooden beam. So what's the significance? So if we go back to the film, the wider view that shows the chopped down tree is over here, which leads me to believe that that wooden beam was unearthed underground during construction, and was a beam from the original King's Bridge, which was located right there. and was never really fully removed. It was just buried. When the creek was buried, they filled in West 230th Street and buried it. So I believe that that beam is at least the people in the film thought it could be a part of the original Kingsbridge. Otherwise, I don't know why they would have filmed that. And so, yeah, so this is an 1873 depiction of the Spuyten Duyvil Creek with the Kingsbridge going over it. And for all the differences and changes in the neighborhood, which I think inspired this film taking, there were a lot of things in the Riverdale Press I came across that seemed very familiar. Like, you know, complaints about crime, about bad public transportation, a lot of questions about how much development is too much development, more questions about crime, complaints about overcrowded schools. So there was a lot of familiarity in going back to these old papers as well. So this is the last film clip from down in Kingsbridge before we move on to Spuyten Duyvil. And this takes place in the Marble Hill Playground. It's just over a minute. The color guards and marching bands seemed very busy in those days. This is 52.
Yeah, look at the flag. There's the Alaska and Hawaii are not on it.
Alaska and Hawaii are not on the flag, says a member of the audience.
Do all those stars in that.
So this is an obscure one. Does anyone think they have any idea what's going on in this scene down at the Marble Hill Playground? Well, it's the dedication of the flagpole. The dedication of the flagpole, which there's a base of the flagpole reads, 100 feet west stood historic King's Bridge, around which centered much of the revolutionary struggle which gave birth to this flag, the Kingsbridge Historical Society. And that's the same playground where if you look at the ground, there's the marker that separates Manhattan from the Bronx, because it's the old center of the Spuyten Duyvil Creek. You can walk over that marker, or straddle both boroughs if you'd like. And there was, like I mentioned, there was this very strong sense of patriotic sentiment in those days. This is a full-page ad taken out in the Riverdale Press by the Kingsbridge Historical Society. Freedom needs you. And it's going to be hard for me to read, but it says, how would you like to roll out of bed some dark morning and have a big palooka tell you where you're going to work that week, what your wife's going to wear, and what your kids have to do? So there was this very intense patriotism in those things. So we're moving on to Spuyten Duyvil now, and a different kind of film clip. Those first film clips, I think, were all shot by the first president of the Historical Society, the Reverend William Teak. And some of you might have his red book in your house. These following ones were shot by a couple that lived up in Spuyten Duyvil. And so the shots are a little more personal and social, but you could tell they really loved being in Spuyten Duyvil because all the scenes include a really dramatic background from Spuyten Duyvil. So this is the first. We all know this. If you're standing over in Inwood Hill Park, looking back towards Spuyten Duyvil, you see the blue building that everyone knows. And that's what this clip is going to depict.
The traffic's reversed. The lower level is Manhattan now. The upper level is Bronx.
So this seems like a happy occasion, getting dressed up and going out with the baby for some shots in the park. You saw Henry Hudson Bridge, of course. I was particularly interested in this shot, looking back at the top right there towards Spuyten Duyvil Hill, and it looks almost barren compared to today. I mean, there's obviously no blue building there.
That, whatever that's at the top of that building is not there anymore.
Well, I'm not sure. So up here, someone in the audience is asking about this building here. There are those reddish terracotta colored apartments by the bus stop there at Kapok and Johnson.
Oh, you think it's true?
It's either,
It could be.
I think it's either that or it's the old PS 24 building which stood there. Maybe if they took the dome off. I'm not really 100% sure what that building is though. And I just get such a kick out of seeing what these people were wearing to the park.
Yeah.
Very glad they preserved this
Yeah.
scenery back here. That's the Columbia Boathouse. Yeah. 19th century building that's still standing. I'm guessing this is a new dog. I don't know if it's still legal to play tackle football in a park. I'm not sure. So one little frame that intrigued me was this one. So this is to the east of Spuyten Duyvil Hill on the east side, not the Hudson River side, but the other side, looking down towards the JFK High School. And you can see there's, up in this area, there is some buildings there. And if you look at a sort of satellite map from today, or satellite image from today, there's absolutely nothing there on that hillside. And what that is, it's the old village of Spuyten Duyvil, right in that area.
Oh, wow.
If you go back to an earlier map, this is a turn of the 20th century map, you'll see there's many, or at least more than several buildings there, and there's even a road, the Spuyten Duyvil Road. And that's stood for a long time. In fact, when people said Spuyten Duyvil, I think most people were referring to this area. This is where a lot of the foundry workers lived that worked in the Johnson foundry. And here's a panoramic shot of that hillside looking towards it from about where Marble Hill is. You could just see how many buildings there were down there. And that on the upper left, that's the original PS 24 building at Kapok and Johnson. We don't see Edge Hill will be over the crest, so we don't get to see Edge Hill Church in this shot. But none of these buildings exist anymore. And this photo is less than 100 years old. So here's another shot of from this couple. I was able to figure out that they lived in that building that you see behind them. That's the Henry Hudson Parkway. And that's
226.
That's 3103 Fairfield behind that.
Oh.
So I think that's 232nd, about north of 232nd. And it looks like they're hanging out with some friends from out of town, showing them around Spuyten Duyvil. Taking your friends to the Henry Hudson Monument. What else?
Look how small all the trees are.
Oh, that's true. The trees are much smaller. Good point.
There's no Shergate building behind it. It's
Very few apartment buildings. And so that Henry Hudson monument was very prominent in the skyline of Spuyten Duyvil at that time. So there's some houses in the background here that you wouldn't see anymore. Watch out, people. They're right on the highway there. This is, what's the name of the old apartment building on Henry Hudson Parkway? Henry Hudson Gardens, is that it? That's
Oh,
what's,
that one.
mm-hmm. Good humor, it's not. Little dirt trail.
Oh.
So you know this house on the Henry Hudson Parkway? It says Esmeralda on the gate. Its days are numbered, by the way. It's already been, the lot has already been divided up into, I think, 4 lots. There are plans for townhouses there, but you'll see it in the next clip, which is why I'm showing it to you here. I think it's an 1890s house. So this is, they're looking out, I told you, I think this couple, or at least one of them, really loved Spuyten Duyvil. Here he is, or she is, filming outside their window at 3103 Fairfield. So there's that house, that's my house. That one's still there. That one's still there.
That,
Henry Hudson Monument really sticks out.
the GW. And
Yeah, the retaining wall that was just rebuilt.
what's
Sure.
that? What? Oh,
Those
that's,
are- That's on the Seton
yeah,
Hospital
that's
property.
the hospital.
Mm-hmm. It was a big facility. This was the main building you're seeing coming to
Holy
view here.
moly.
So this is like about where the Whitehall swimming pool is. You'll see it again in another clip here.
So there's a marble, little marble with the numbers actually at the corner. 232.
There's another clip of the hospital.
You know the name?
Now Seton Park, Seton Hospital. So it became, the property behind it became Seton Park. And I think it served for a long time tuberculosis patients at the turn of the 20th century. There was a children's hospital there. It was a really big facility with many buildings. This is their new
I think part of it.
building. Mm.
Oh,
So here's another one. This is something, I don't know, do other people do this where the friends come in from out of town and they want to walk them across the bridge? I always want my friends to walk across the bridge. Well, this fellow walked across the bridge and took some shots down by the water. Yeah, so that's this,
Oh,
that's the corner that, where the train turns up the Hudson River.
much prettier down there.
An older train station there. Yeah, it was a lot tidier down there. Well, this building was recently torn down.
Right.
This is
Oh, that's the one where they put up the Henry?
the Villa Rosa Bonheur building where the Henry is today. Mhm. That's Independence Avenue, southern end of it, leading down to the Villa Rosa Bonheur. We're gonna talk about that shot in a minute.
Charlotte. What? Oh, that's the Edge Hill.
That's the Edge Hill Church building.
Everything else around, oh my.
And an earlier color scheme, which we hope to
That's a great.
recreate.
You ever been in the front door? You ever been there at the top? Yeah, so much prettier down there than Johnson.
And there was actually another track that they don't use or
Yeah,
was taken out, that one that curves around. That looks very similar to what it does to today. So I wanted to take you back to this part of the clip here. Right, this shot. Because this shows three lovely buildings, one of which is still standing. There's down at the bottom, there is that Villa Rosa Bonheur at the bottom of Independence Avenue. And that's this one. And then just above it is Edge Hill, former Edge Hill Church of Spuyten Duyvil. And up on the left, a little hard to see, this is a building known as the Berry and Johnson House. And this house predated the American Revolution. And just before this film was shot, the Johnson family, who ran the Johnson Iron Foundry and the Spuyten Duyvil Creek, they lived there. And this was a big deal when this house came down. The local people just really loved this thing. They knew about its history. The Historical Society, the Kingsbridge Historical Society, was trying to create a movement to lobby Robert Moses to not tear it down. So here's another shot of the house there. So this is the Johnson family on their front porch. So this is where there's now a Parks restroom. They tore it down and built the Parks restroom in Lower Henry Hudson Park, you know, by the basketball courts, up from the Little League field. So there was sort of this war of letters going on in the Riverdale Press, where people were writing these open letters to Robert Moses. Moses would write back, and this is the last letter written to the Riverdale Press from Robert Moses. There is a limit to such things, and that limit is reached at structures which have no history, which are in disrepair, which have no exhibits, and which serve no useful purpose. Sincerely, Robert Moses.
Is that the palooka that you?
So, and people were oohing and ahhing over this one, this great color image from the 50s of Edge Hill Church. I mean, this is now the home of the Kingsbridge Historical Society. So I'm happy to say that you are able to preserve some things in New York City. Not easy to do, but it's now the home of the Kingsbridge Historical Society, and hopefully it'll be a place where we can preserve local history and put on performances of all kinds. And if you'd like to join the Historical Society as a member, come talk to me afterwards. But I think it's important to preserve even this local history so people know that what's worth preserving out of all the projects that go on in this neighborhood. So thanks again to RSS, and thank you all for coming. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and I think there might be a question on Zoom too, if Tabitha at the RSS can help me get that. Yes, Mr. Gillen.
You mentioned that 230th Street was Spuyten Duyvil Creek. Did it go across Broadway and onto what is now Exterior Street to get back to the Harlem River and
yeah, so,
separate
okay, so
Belleville?
it went across 230th Street, sort of between like Cordelier and Broadway, and then went south, you know, between Cordelier Avenue and Broadway, and then went south down Broadway and sort of, and wound its way through where Target is essentially today.
That's 16 years.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much the route. And it wasn't like just a narrow creek and that's it. There was a wide marsh really all around it that extended quite a ways.
But on Broadway.
So Broadway south of 230th didn't exist. So there was there was the Kingsbridge at Kingsbridge Avenue and 230th, and when you crossed into the Bronx side, you would hook right, go east to basically on sort of the north side of 230th Street. Then at Broadway, when you were going east and you hit Broadway, it would continue north, but the Spuyten Duyvil Creek was on the south side, and that was just water. And then on the other side on Marble Hill, there was the Kingsbridge Road, which came up from Lower Manhattan. We could talk about this for a long time, I'm sure. Yes.
Still things got from that family. How are they advertised?
How are they? Well, then I have to tell you my secrets for finding stuff on eBay. Someone's asking how I found these films on eBay, from the Spuyten Duyvil couple. And I think I don't know, I have eBay alerts on terms like Spuyten Duyvil and that sort of thing. It seems
Yeah, it
strange,
does.
doesn't it? I feel like that baby's got to be out there somewhere. On the film canisters, someone asked if I knew the names of the people in the film. I don't, but on the film canisters, it says it's written 1951 in pencil, and it says Frankie and Georgina.
That's great.
And I figured out they lived in Fairfield Avenue, so on 3103 Fairfield, if anyone thinks they can figure it out, that'd be great. Any other questions?
Does that church have national historic landmark status?
Does the church is not a church anymore. We don't call it a church. Yes, yes. So Edge Hill is on the National Register of Historic Places. It's on the State Register of Historic Places, and it is a New York City landmark. And so this was built by subscription from the congregation at Riverdale Presbyterian. Put money into the construction of this building, as did the Johnson family and other business associates of the Johnsons. And so the Tiffany windows inside the building, which are absolutely stunning, and you should all come to our events and check them out. Those are dedicated to different members of the Johnson family. Mm-hmm. Yes.
My parents moved to Bobble Hill, June 1965. My mother is 96 today.
Oh, wow.
Wow. What got to us as a child, I went to see a 141 Kennedy, was we couldn't determine why did we get two phone books, one from Manhattan. It really was confusing, we didn't know where we lived.
So we had a question, or really more like a memory from the audience of someone who grew up in Marble Hill in the 60s. And being confused as to why they were getting two phone books. So Marble Hill, quite famously, was once attached to Manhattan Island, but was chopped off in 1895 when they cut through the Harlem River Ship Canal. And the Spuyten Duyvil Creek was filled in, and it's now connected to the Bronx, but still there's a little gray area because, you know, they have representation, Manhattan representation. So it's a confusing conundrum. Anything else? Okay, I want to check if anybody online. How do I do that?
Yeah, does
Stop.
anybody have questions online? You could go ahead and unmute yourself.
Well, hi, it's years and years ago, your group did a tour of Kingsbridge and explained how the city sewers or water lines were put in, and so some of the houses are below grade. And that was a great tour, and also
Okay,
of the churches. That was wonderful.
Thank you. I'm going to share this with the audience here. So a person in the on Zoom remembered coming on one of our tours, and she remembered in particular what we talked about in terms of the construction of the sewers down in Kingsbridge. We have these really dramatic photos of all the old houses in Kingsbridge with the sewer on top of the street and the manholes about 10 feet above ground. Because the way they built the sewer, since the whole neighborhood really had to come up because it was very much prone to flooding, so they built the sewer on top of the street and they filled up to the manholes, which were 10 feet above ground, to raise the whole grade of the entire neighborhood. And so that's why if you go down to like where the Kingsbridge Library is, Corlear, Tibbet Avenue, you will see houses where the front door is actually below grade. So that's because they built the sewer above the first floor. Yeah, yes. Okay.
Starting to take us up to Van Cortlandt Park, and where the I think St. Patrick's nursing home is at the top of everything. We would start our sledding run, and we would sled right down to the boathouse. There was no vegan then.
Wow.
So 52.
So someone's sharing a fun memory of sledding in Van Cortlandt Park in the early 50s, before the Major Deegan, that whole, I've seen footage of people skiing in Van Cortlandt Park, And I wondered, where the heck did that happen?
Down to the other side, the east side of the Deegan. 'Cause we went all over.
So sledding all the way down the hill that the Deegan's on, that's amazing. So there must not have, it must not have been as forested nearly as it is today. Today it's covered in forest.
The area was kind of all.
Oh, okay, interesting.
I heard it was the golf course.
Oh, did people ski on the golf course?
Down near the lake, the pond down there.
Ah, I see, okay. Oh, yeah, that's that same area, yeah. Did you have another question, David?
Yeah, about the Edge Hill there.
Yes.
It's oddly located between the eastern leg and the western leg of Independence Avenue. I can't quite figure out, but anyway, now there's an apartment building to the west, a very large one, and a very large one to the south. Who owned it beforehand, or was it the church property that they sold off over time?
So, Edge Hill Church has a basement, but we don't call it the basement. It's called the Undercroft. That's the name that it had when it was a church, and we love the name, so we're keeping the name Undercroft. But anyway, when the church was first built in the 1880s, I don't think it had a bathroom. So the congregation in the 50s sold off a big slice of their property, to the south, I guess you could say southwest or west, to a developer who built an apartment building there. And that funded the construction of the sort of hangout room in Undercroft with a bathroom. And so that's how that works. What's interesting though, is one thing that's kind of annoying about the building is that you mentioned that it's between Independence Avenue on one side and Independence Avenue on the other side. So delivery drivers get really messed up. But in addition, the lower Independence, as it's called, didn't start off as a mapped street. It was like a private path owned by the Johnson family. And the Johnson family had their own private sewer line under lower Independence, which basically I'm sure just dumped everything right in the river. But that was the original plumbing of Edge Hill. So when that needed to be fixed, it was the plumbing, the sewer line, since that was never a map street, is above upper Independence. So we have to pump everything up to go down. Yeah. Maybe more detail than the Zoom folks wanted to know, but that's, yes.
With reference to that sewer project that you were describing along, Tibbet, the raised sewers,
Yes.
isn't that also the route that Tibbet Brook took?
Yeah, so Tibbetts Brook wound its way through the valley of Kingsbridge from the Mill Pond in Van Cortlandt Park,
Right.
or what used to be called Van Cortlandt Lake, where's the waterfall that goes into the sewer there. So yeah, that was a creek that wound its way through Kingsbridge on the west side of, well, if you're on Broadway and you want to get on the BX10, you walk up a little hill, right? So that hill in the middle of Kingsbridge became an island at high
I think
tide.
I have it on Max, yes.
And then on the west side of
Yeah,
that,
see.
what we normally refer to as Tibbetts Brook, although that whole area was basically one
I
big
did.
estuary. So when it was high tide, salt water flooded almost all the way up to the Van Cortlandt house.
And didn't Tibbet come down and get connected to Spuyten Duyvil Creek?
Yes.
Oh, we had 26
all
on
one
another
area.
one.
And it's a little hard to say where one ended and one.
That's the-
Like the Harlem River, where does that end and the Spuyten Duyvil Creek begin? It's all sort of connected there. Is that anything else on Zoom? All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, RSS.
Actually, we thought 20 people were coming and we got 40.
There you go.
So we'll take a little whatever we have before you
Thank you,
leave.
that was great. Thanks a lot.
Good to see you. Nice to see you. Say hi to Ethan for me.